My son said it was just a doctor's visit. Instead, he drove me to a nursing home and signed me away. But in the suitcase he packed, I found the papers that made me a millionaire. If you're here, subscribe and tell me your age. Then let's go back to the moment everything began. The cough began like a whisper, just a tickle in my chest, easy to ignore. 78, what else could I expect? My body had become a library of complaints. Stiff knees, aching hands, nights too long and mornings too short. Cough was nothing new. I told myself it would pass like everything else had. I brewed tea with honey, wrapped Henry's old wool scarf around my shoulders and carried on. But it didn't pass. The cough deepened, rattling my ribs at night, dragging me out of sleep until I sat upright in bed with a handkerchief pressed to my lips. Alone in the house, every sound felt amplified. The ticking of the clock, the moan of the pipes, the silence pressing at the windows. I reminded myself, you've survived worse, Mary. Still, when Richard visited on Sunday, he noticed. Or at least he pretended to. Mom, you can't keep going like this, he said, leaning against my kitchen counter as I stirred a pot of soup. He didn't taste it. He hadn't in years, but his eyes studied me with a practiced look. You need real care. A doctor. Maybe even a place where you can rest for a bit. I waved the spoon at him. It's only a cough. He smiled the way he did when negotiating something at work, that polished, patient smile. Mom, you're getting weaker. Don't you think you deserve comfort? To be looked after? The word stung more than I let on. Comfort. Looked after. Henry had once promised me that very thing. When we're old, Mary, I'll take care of you. But Henry was gone, and now all I had was Richard. I wanted to believe he meant well. I'll drive you tomorrow, he said, taking my hand before I could protest. Just a checkup. If they suggest a short stay, at least you'll get some rest. I was tired. So tired. Against my better judgment, I nodded. The sky was gray the morning Richard came for me. Not stormy. Just that dull, blank kind of gray that sits heavy in the air like a warning. I waited by the door with my scarf wrapped twice around my neck, my handbag in my lap, suitcase by my feet. He had promised to take me for a checkup. Maybe some tests. Nothing serious. When he pulled up to the house, I stood to wave, and for a moment, just one, I felt like someone being cared for. Looked after. Ready? He asked as he took the suitcase with one hand. We should get going. Appointments in an hour. I nodded, though something in his tone made my throat tighten. We didn't talk much on the way. I watched the familiar buildings pass. The grocery store where I used to buy strawberries for Emma when she was little. The post office. The corner where Henry and I once danced in the rain years ago, laughing like children. I pressed my fingers to my knees and whispered to myself, it's just a checkup. But then he turned off the main road. Richard, I asked, a thread of cold running down my spine. Where are we going? The hospitals. I know, Mom, he cut in too quickly. It's not the hospital. It's better. He turned into a driveway lined with tidy hedges. A large sign stood near the road. Willow Pines Assisted Living. I blinked. My breath caught. What is this? He parked the car and turned to me with a rehearsed softness in his eyes. Mom, you've been tired. You're coughing. It's too much being alone in that house. But you said, it's not forever, he interrupted gently. Just until you feel stronger. I stared at him. You told me it was a doctor's appointment. It is. Sort of. He reached over and touched my hand. This place has medical staff. A room of your own. People to talk to. Meals cooked for you. It's safer. You lied to me. His expression didn't change. I made a decision. You need rest, not arguments. Come on, let's go inside. No, I whispered, pulling my hand away. I want to go home. Mom, his voice lowered. Please don't make a scene. I felt my chest tightening. Not from the cough, but from something deeper, sharper. You think I don't see what this is? I said, barely able to get the words past my throat. You're putting me away. Like a coat that's out of season. He looked out the windshield. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic? I packed my things because I thought you were helping me. You said. My voice cracked. You said it was just a checkup. It's for your own good. You don't get to decide what that means. We sat in silence. The engine ticked softly. I looked out the window at the white walls of the building, the neat shrubs. Didn't look cruel. But it felt final. Felt like goodbye. Finally he stepped out, walked around and opened my door. Please, Mom. Let's just talk to them. Try it for a week. If you don't like it, we'll figure something else out. He was lying. Again. But I was tired. The cold had settled into my bones and the cough when it came bent me in half. I couldn't fight and breathe at the same time. So I let him take my hand. Inside everything was too quiet. The woman at the front desk smiled at me like I was a guest at a hotel. Mrs. Taylor, we've been expecting you. I turned sharply to Richard. Expecting me? He didn't flinch. I handled the paperwork. All you need to do is settle in. My mouth opened then closed. I was already signed in. A young nurse approached. Let's get you comfortable in your room, Mrs. Taylor. I didn't move. Richard leaned in and kissed my cheek. You'll be fine here. I'll come visit this weekend. This weekend? I echoed. You said you'd stay. You said. I'll call tomorrow. I promise. His eyes didn't meet mine. Then he turned and walked away. The doors closed behind him. I stood in the middle of the lobby, the air around me suddenly colder. I had never felt smaller. Room 214 had pale yellow walls and a single bed with hospital corners. A small armchair faced a window that looked out onto a winter garden, bare branches, cracked stepping stones, the ghost of spring sleeping under frost. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the suitcase he had packed. One sweater. One photo of Henry. No books. No notes. No home. I thought of my kitchen, the ticking clock, the smell of cinnamon tea. I thought of the quilt folded at the end of my bed, of the apple tree just outside the window waiting. He said I'd go back. But deep down I knew I wasn't going home. At first, I watched the hallway like a child waits at the window for her father to come home. Each afternoon after lunch, I sat in the armchair near the window, my scarf folded neatly in my lap, and listened to the faint shuffle of footsteps beyond the door. Anytime the elevator dinged, my heart stirred. Anytime a voice rose in the lobby, I straightened up. But it was never him. Richard didn't come on Sunday. Nor on Monday. On Wednesday, a nurse knocked gently and handed me a small plastic bag. Inside was a box of herbal tea store brand, the cheapest you could buy, and a pair of acrylic socks that smelled faintly of glue. There's a note, she added, as if that would make it better. I unfolded the slip of paper. It wasn't a note. Just a post-it with 2 words scribbled in that familiar, impatient handwriting. Stay warm. No love, Richard. No signature. No mention of when I'd see him again. Just stay warm. I pressed the note against my chest and sat quietly for a long time. I tried to convince myself he was busy. That work was overwhelming, that Emma was sick, that life simply moved faster for him now. I told myself these things until they began to sound like lullabies. But each day the silence deepened. The staff here smiled when they passed me. They asked if I needed anything. But they didn't sit. They didn't stay. The woman in room 210 sometimes waved at me from across the dining room. She had bright eyes and a voice that sounded like honey. Once she leaned in and whispered, "Don't worry, dear. They always come around eventually." But what if they don't? The second week he appeared. Just after lunch, without warning. I looked up from my book, and there he was standing in the doorway with a paper bag from the pharmacy. "Hey, Mom," he said, stepping inside like he still belonged. I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I had practiced that smile. Like armor. "You came," I said. "Of course," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "Just been swamped." He pulled out a small tin of mints, a puzzle book, and a bottle of lotion. The kind that smells like artificial lavender and leaves your skin sticky. "Thought you could use a few things." I looked at the items. "No note this time?" He blinked. "What?" "Nothing," I said, placing the tin on the nightstand. He sat in the chair but kept checking his phone, tapping the screen like it owed him something. "How's Emma?" I asked, hoping for conversation. "She's fine. Busy. Exams." "And you?" He shrugged. "Same old. You know how it is." I didn't. He stayed for 13 minutes. I counted. When he stood to leave, I followed him to the hallway. "Will you come Sunday?" I asked the question too fragile. He hesitated. "We'll see. I'll try." Before I could reply, he added, almost as an afterthought, "You don't need much, right? I mean, everything's taken care of here." Something in me cracked. "You think this is enough?" I said, my voice quiet but firm. "A visit every other week, cheap tea, and socks from the clearance bin?" He stiffened. "Don't start." "I'm not starting. I'm surviving." His jaw clenched. "I'm doing my best." "Are you?" He looked at me, then really looked. And for a second I saw the boy I raised. The boy who used to cry when I forgot to pack dessert in his lunchbox. The boy who clung to me at airports. But then it passed. He adjusted his coat, turned, and walked away. I stood in the hallway long after the elevator doors closed, the plastic bag of pharmacy gifts crinkling in my hand. That night, I opened the lotion and threw it away. The socks I tucked into the drawer and forgot. The mints I gave to the woman in room 210. "You don't want them?" she asked, surprised. "No," I said softly. "They're not mine." Started with a sentence. Casual. Barely a whisper over a plate of mashed potatoes. "I saw a house on Maple Lane listed this morning," Ruth said, stirring her soup. "Looked just like yours." I blinked. The dining hall was unusually quiet that afternoon. The rain outside soft and steady against the windows. I thought I had misheard. "Sorry?" I asked, my spoon hovering in midair. Ruth, my table mate and roommate for the past few weeks, shrugged. "The little yellow house with the ivy on the porch. Yours, right? Big oak tree in front?" The real estate flyer was on the table near the elevator. Said, "Charming vintage property, needs updating." I remember because I always thought your porch swing looked cozy. The blood drained from my face. My fork clinked against the plate. "Are you sure it was mine?" I whispered. "Of course I'm sure. You showed me pictures." She chuckled. "That ugly rooster mailbox? Who else has that?" I stared at her, frozen. She didn't mean harm. She thought she was making conversation. But her words had lit a fuse I hadn't even known was there. That evening, I waited until Ruth fell asleep, soft, raspy snores rising and falling like waves. Then I slipped from the room, my slippers nearly silent against the linoleum floors. The hallway was dim, the kind of quiet that only exists in buildings where everyone's waiting for something to end. Near the elevator, on the little wooden side table, sat a small stack of real estate flyers. Some already dog-eared, others pristine. I sifted through them, my hands trembling. There it was. 127 Maple Lane. Charming 3-bedroom, vintage finishes, large backyard with mature trees. List price, $284,000. My house, my porch, my swing. Even the rose bush beneath the front window, slightly overgrown and wild, was pictured in soft afternoon light. I felt my knees give. I sat down on the bench beside the table and stared at the paper, the ink bleeding slightly at the edges where my hand had begun to sweat. There was no coming soon. No mention of probate. No hint of uncertainty. It was listed. For sale. Already on the market. And I hadn't signed a thing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat upright in bed, the flyer hidden beneath my blanket, my hands clenched into fists. In the dark, the truth took shape. Richard. He had done this. I thought back. Every conversation, every visit, every quick dismissal. How he always changed the subject when I asked about the mail, the bills, the phone. How he avoided eye contact when I mentioned my will. "You don't need to worry about all that," he had said. "Just rest." But this wasn't rest. This was theft, cloaked in good intentions. I closed my eyes and saw it all differently now. When he packed my suitcase, he'd already made the decision. When he drove me here, he knew. When he kissed my cheek and said he'd come back soon, he had already signed the papers. I wasn't resting. I was being erased. In the morning, I asked to speak to the facility manager. She led me to her office, polite but puzzled. Her name was Janine. Kind, professional, with a mug that said "Best Grandma Ever" and a picture of 2 little boys taped to her monitor. "Is something wrong, Mrs. Taylor?" I placed the flyer on her desk. "Can you tell me who authorized this?" I asked, my voice barely holding steady. She glanced at it. "Oh, I believe your son, Mr. Richard Taylor, submitted the property documents when we arranged your residency." "Did I sign anything?" She hesitated. "Well, your son presented power of attorney, medical and financial. I blinked. I never gave him that. Her lips parted slightly. He brought documents. Notarized. I sat back in the chair as if something had struck me in the chest. Power of attorney. I never signed that. Not for him. Not for anyone. Janine looked uncomfortable now. Her hands folded tightly. Would you like me to get someone to speak with you? Legal counsel, perhaps? No, I said. Not yet. Back in my room, I opened the bottom drawer of the dresser, the one I hadn't touched since the day I arrived. There, under the extra socks and the unused robe, was the small folder I had insisted on bringing. It contained only a few things: my birth certificate, Henry's passing notice, and an old, yellowed copy of my will. Nowhere in it was Richard granted authority. I had made sure of that years ago, after one too many tense conversations about downsizing. He had forged something. Somewhere along the line, my son had decided that my house, my life, was more valuable as property than as memory. And now he was selling it without a word. Ruth stirred in her bed, coughing lightly. I sat in the chair by the window, holding the flyer, staring at the trees swaying in the garden below. I thought of the fireplace where Henry and I would play cards in the winter. The kitchen where I taught Emma to make cinnamon rolls. The bedroom with the creaky floorboard I never fixed. All of it now labeled as charming fixer-upper. Tears came hot and sudden. Not because I had lost a house, but because I had lost him. Richard. My boy. The one I held through fevered nights, who once cried when I missed his school recital, who told me at 17, "Mom, you're the strongest person I know." That boy was gone. In his place stood a man who smiled while he signed me away. It had been nearly 2 weeks since I found the flyer. I hadn't confronted him. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Not for the answers, not for the justifications I knew would come laced with condescension. I told myself I needed to gather proof, to stay calm. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid. Afraid that if I asked, he'd confirm what I already suspected, that he didn't see me as a person anymore. Just a signature. A burden. A fading shadow of the mother I used to be. He came on a Friday. I didn't know he was coming until I looked up from my book and saw his reflection in the glass. He was standing just outside the door to the common room, holding a coffee in one hand and scrolling his phone with the other. He looked casual, relaxed, like this was a chore between meetings. "Hi, Mom," he said when he saw me, pocketing his phone. "Thought I'd swing by." I stood slowly, setting my book aside. "You didn't call." "I figured a surprise visit might cheer you up." He smiled. That same rehearsed smile. The one that didn't reach his eyes. We walked to my room in silence. When the door closed behind us, I turned to face him, hands clenched around the arms of the chair. "I saw it," I said. "The flyer. The listing." His eyes flickered just for a second. Then he sighed long and slow. "Mom. You sold my house." He didn't answer right away. He took a sip of his coffee and looked around the room like he was checking for a misplaced item. "It's not that simple." "Then explain it to me." I snapped, my voice shaking. "Explain how my home ended up on a real estate flyer without me signing a single thing." "You weren't using it," he said flatly. "It was sitting there. Empty. And you're here now. Where you're safe." I stared at him. That house wasn't empty. It was mine. His shoulders dropped slightly, as if he were speaking to someone fragile, unreasonable. "Mom, be honest. You were alone all day. No one coming over. No one visiting. It was just walls and memories. You were lonely. Here you have care. Routine. People. It's better." "Better for who?" My voice cracked. He stepped closer. "Look, Emma needs braces. We're behind on the mortgage. And the market's good right now. If we waited, the house would have lost value." It made sense. I blinked, stunned. "So that's it? I'm traded in for orthodontics and a lower interest rate?" He rubbed his temples. "Don't twist this into something dramatic." "You lied to me, Richard." He didn't even flinch. "I protected you. You forged papers. You weren't thinking clearly. Don't you dare." The air went still. I took a shaky breath. "I thought you were helping me. I thought this was temporary." His face hardened. "You're not going back, Mom." Silence. I didn't want to tell you this way," he added softer now. "But it's done. The money's already being used. It's for the best." "For who?" I asked again. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "For all of us. You being alone in that big place, it wasn't working. And honestly," he gave a small shrug, "you didn't need it." Something in me broke. "Say it," I whispered. "What?" "Say what you really mean." He hesitated, then looked away. "You think I'm a burden." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Well, aren't you?" The words hit like a slap. I felt it in my ribs, my throat, my spine. For a moment the world blurred. I sat down hard in the chair because my knees gave out. "You used to cry when I left the room," I whispered. "You used to call me after every job interview, every bad date. You once said no one in the world would ever love you the way I did." "I was a kid," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. "No," I said. "You were my son." He didn't respond. "I'm still your mother." "Yeah, well," he said, voice low, "mothers get old. That's life." I closed my eyes, not to cry but because I didn't want to see his face anymore. He left soon after. Said he had to get back to the office. Promised he'd call soon. Didn't hug me. Didn't even touch my shoulder. The door clicked shut, and the room felt colder than it had before. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the floorboard near the pantry that always creaked. About the way the house smelled in spring, when the windows were open and the lilac bush bloomed. I thought about all the nights I sat at the kitchen table with bills spread out before me, trying to make things work so Richard could go on a school trip or get a new jacket for winter. I thought about the time I pawned my wedding ring to pay for his college textbooks. "You're a burden," he'd said. Not angry, not even cruel. Just indifferent, like it was a fact. And maybe to him it was. But to me? It was the moment I stopped waiting for him to remember who I was. It was the moment I stopped hoping. 4 days after Richard's visit, I moved like someone underwater. I went through the motions, meals, medication, polite nods to nurses, but everything felt hollow. My voice had shrunk. My hands trembled more than usual. The woman in the mirror looked smaller, faded. I stopped waiting for calls. Stopped looking at the calendar. Stopped opening the curtains in the morning. I was tired of pretending I mattered to anyone. And then one afternoon she arrived. Her name was Anna. She was new, young, maybe early 30s, with soft brown eyes and a halo of curls that she always tied up but never quite tamed. Her voice was gentle but not false. When she said, "Good morning, Mrs. Taylor," it didn't sound like part of a checklist. It sounded like she meant it. "Mary," I corrected her on her second day. "You don't have to call me Mrs. I've lost the authority to demand titles." She smiled, her eyes warm. "Then Mary it is." She was different. She didn't just check my vitals and vanish. She sat sometimes, asked questions no one else bothered with. "What did you do before this?" she asked once, sitting beside my bed after changing the linens. "I lived," I said. "I cooked, I cleaned, I raised a boy who forgot me. I worked retail and baked bread and fought with Henry over wallpaper colors. Nothing that goes on a plaque." She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "That sounds like a full life." We started talking more. It wasn't a grand friendship. No dramatic heart-to-hearts. Just small, consistent kindness. A steady presence in a world that had become painfully quiet. Anna always smelled faintly of citrus and baby shampoo. She hummed when she worked, soft, aimless tunes I didn't recognize but found comforting. She brought me books from the staff library. Knitted me a pair of fingerless gloves after she noticed how often I rubbed my hands in the cold. Left a little bag of lemon candies in my drawer. And she never asked for anything in return. That alone made her feel like a miracle. One Saturday morning, she appeared in the doorway with someone beside her. A boy, maybe 10 years old, with dark curls, noise-canceling headphones, and a Spider-Man hoodie zipped up to his chin. He hovered behind her, eyes wide, hands fluttering near his chest like nervous birds. "Mary," Anna said gently, "this is my son Lucas. I hope it's okay. His care program's closed today, and I had to bring him for my shift. He'll stay in the staff room mostly, but I thought maybe he could meet you." I looked at the boy. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't afraid. Just cautious. Like a cat deciding whether or not to trust your hand. "Hi, Lucas," I said quietly. He didn't answer. Just stared. Anna knelt beside him. "Remember what we practiced?" Lucas gave the smallest nod, then took a step toward me. "You live here," he said slowly, carefully. Each word was placed like a tile. "Yes," I said. "I do. Do you have cookies?" I blinked, then smiled. "I might." He smiled back, just a flash, and then darted out into the hallway. Anna sighed, half laughing. "He'll be back. He always comes back." He did. That afternoon, while Anna was making rounds, Lucas came back to my door with a coloring book and a fistful of crayons. He didn't ask. Just walked in, sat cross-legged on the floor, and started coloring. I watched him for a while. His focus was unshakable. His small hands moved with quiet precision, and though he didn't say much, he kept glancing up at me, as if checking to see if I was still watching. When he finished, he stood, walked over, and handed me the page. It was a picture of a bear and a rabbit sitting under a tree. He had colored the tree entirely purple. "For you," he said. I didn't know what to say, so I took it with both hands. "Thank you," I whispered. "It's beautiful." He hesitated, then said, "Mom says you're nice." I smiled. "Your mom is a very good woman. She says you remind her of her grandma." That stopped me. "I do." He nodded. "You talk soft and your eyes are tired, but warm." My throat tightened. He looked at me, then straight on, and said, "You can be my grandma too, if you want." I didn't cry, but I wanted to. Instead, I reached out and touched his hand. I'd like that very much. From that day on, Lucas visited me whenever Anna brought him. He didn't always talk. Sometimes he'd sit and color. Other times he'd line up objects on my table. Pens, tissues, cough drops, into perfectly even rows. He loved numbers, patterns, and humming show tunes under his breath. He never asked about my past. Never tiptoed around my pain. To him, I wasn't broken. I was simply Mary. And in his eyes, that was enough. Anna once caught me watching Lucas while he slept curled in a chair. Headphones slipped off, mouth slightly open. She sat beside me and said, "He doesn't trust people easily." "I know," I said. "But he trusts you." I looked down at my hands, at the deep lines time had drawn there. "I thought I was done," I said. "After everything. I didn't think I had anything left to give." Anna shook her head. "You're giving him more than you know." We sat in silence for a while. Then she whispered, "He asked if he could call you Grandma Mary." I swallowed hard. "Of course he can." That night, I hung Lucas's purple tree drawing beside my bed, and for the first time in weeks I fell asleep smiling. It started with the smell of cedar. One afternoon, after Lucas had left and Anna was making her evening rounds, I opened the closet in my room and pulled out the old brown suitcase I had brought with me from the house. I hadn't touched it since the day I arrived. Richard had packed it, of course, chosen what to take and what to leave behind. A single sweater. One photograph of me and Henry. A pair of slippers. My old Bible. A lavender sachet that had long since lost its scent. But the suitcase still carried something else, time. It smelled like old floorboards and warm summer dust. Like closets that hadn't been opened in years. I sat on the bed and slowly began to unpack it, not looking for anything in particular. Just remembering. Underneath a pile of scarves, I found a cracked envelope, brittle at the edges. My name was written on the front in my own handwriting, Mary H. Taylor. I'd sealed it long ago, likely meaning to file it or throw it away. But I hadn't. I opened it carefully, expecting a receipt, an old grocery list, maybe Henry's crossword puzzles. What I found was a stack of papers. Crisp, dry, slightly yellowed. And then my breath caught. Tremont Industrial Corporation Employee Stock Program. There were several certificates, each with my name printed in a neat serif font, dated back to 1984, 1986, and 1991. I blinked at them. It couldn't be. Tremont had been the factory where I worked for 15 years. Before Henry got sick. Before Richard finished high school. They had given employees a loyalty package once, a kind of thank you in the form of stock options. But everyone said it wasn't worth anything. The company nearly folded in the 90s. I'd always assumed they were worthless. And yet they were here. Intact. with official seals. My heart began to race. I turned the papers over and found a folded newsletter tucked between the certificates. The date was recent, just 3 months ago. A headline caught my eye. Tremont rebounds. Once failing factory now worth millions after green energy merger. Millions. I read the article twice, then a third time. It was a merger. Some tech startup had bought the infrastructure, retooled the old machinery, and turned it into a sustainable battery manufacturing plant. Investors had jumped. Stocks had soared. I stared at my name on the certificate again. Was it possible? The next morning I waited for Anna. When she came in with my morning tea, I handed her the envelope without saying a word. She frowned slightly, sat down beside me, and began to read. Halfway through the first page, her eyebrows lifted. By the end, she was staring at me like I just handed her buried treasure. "Mary," she breathed. This could be worth a fortune." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "It won't bring back the house." "No," she said. "But it might give you power." I looked at her, startled. She leaned in. "They tried to write you out, but they forgot one thing." "What?" She touched the top of the certificate. "You still exist." Anna helped me make calls. We reached out to Tremont's new investor relations office, verified the validity of the documents, and, after 2 tense days, received confirmation. The shares were real. The value? Well into the 6 figures. I sat in stunned silence when I heard the number. Not just enough to live on. Enough to choose. Enough to fight. Anna squeezed my hand. "What do you want to do?" she asked softly. I stared out the window, at the frost starting to melt from the garden path. "I want to stop being a victim," I said. That night, I opened my Bible and tucked the certificates inside its cover. Then I sat in the dark and whispered to Henry, wherever he was. They thought I was done. But I've just remembered who I am. He came unannounced, just like always. Late afternoon, coat slung over one shoulder, sunglasses still on despite the overcast sky. He walked through the front entrance of Willow Pines like he owned it, chatting briefly with the receptionist before finding his way to my room. I was by the window, folding Lucas's latest drawing, a blue sun and green clouds, when the knock came. "Hey, Mom," Richard said, stepping inside. "You look better." I didn't answer right away. Just nodded and gestured to the chair across from me. He sat and got straight to the point. "I brought some forms. Nothing too complicated. A few updates the lawyer suggested for your will, just to simplify things." I smiled. That rehearsed, brittle smile I'd seen on his face so many times. "Of course. You always think of everything." He seemed relieved. "Great. I'll just walk you through them." He pulled a thick envelope from his bag and began spreading out papers on the table between us. His voice turned technical, words like streamlining, non-contested transfer, tax structure. I let him talk. Let him believe. And then I reached into my drawer and placed a second folder on the table. He paused. "What's that?" "You'll see," I said calmly. "But let's talk about your paperwork first. What exactly am I signing away this time?" He blinked, momentarily thrown off. "Mom, it's just to make sure your estate is handled cleanly. It's better if we consolidate control. Less confusion later." "Consolidate," I repeated. Such a clean word for take away. His jaw tightened. "It's for your own good." "Funny," I said. "You used that exact phrase when you left me here." He looked away. "Can we not do this again?" I opened my folder. Slowly. Deliberately. "These," I said, spreading out the documents, "are stock certificates. For Tremont Industrial. Fully verified. Legally mine." His brow furrowed. "What?" "I found them in the suitcase you packed. Ironic, really. You tried to empty my life and instead gave me back power." He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You're not making sense." I reached for another paper. "This is the contact info for the attorney I've retained. Her name is Evelyn Cole. She specializes in asset protection and elder exploitation cases." "Mom." "And this," I said, placing a third paper down, "is the charter for the Lucas Taylor Foundation, a nonprofit in the works, dedicated to supporting children with neurodivergent needs. Initial funding, my shares." He stared at the paper like it was on fire. Lucas, he said, stunned. Yes, Anna's son. The one you've never asked about, though he spends more time with me than you have in years. You're giving it all away? To strangers? I stood now, not shaking, not frail. To people who see me, who sit with me, who don't smile only when they want something signed. He scoffed. This is ridiculous. You're not thinking clearly. No, I said. For the first time in months I am. His voice dropped, venom soft behind the teeth. You don't have to do this. You already did it, Richard, I whispered. You sold my house. You forged my name. You told me I was a burden. He flinched. I was angry, he said. No, I corrected. You were honest. That night, Anna and I sat together in the small staff kitchen. She poured 2 mugs of chamomile tea and pushed one toward me. You sure you're ready? She asked. I nodded. The papers had been filed. The trust had been initiated. The lawyer would handle everything. Ensure Richard couldn't touch a cent. Ensure I stayed in control for as long as I was alive. I wanted to hurt him, I admitted. For what he did. For what he said. Anna didn't interrupt. But more than that, I wanted to matter again. Not just exist. She reached across the table and touched my hand. You do. Lucas peeked his head in then, clutching his stuffed rabbit, eyes wide. He waddled over, leaned into my lap and whispered, You're my favorite grandma. I kissed the top of his head. And you're my reason, I said. In the days that followed, I prepared everything. Quietly. With purpose. The past, once full of grief, had given me a gift. And this time no one would steal it from me. The day they arrived, the sky was too blue. It should have been overcast. Somber. Something that matched the storm I felt rising in my chest. But no, the sun poured through the windows of willow pines like it was any other afternoon. Except it wasn't. I sat in the common room, my hands calm in my lap, Lucas's drawing tucked neatly into my pocket like a talisman. Anna stood nearby, pretending to sort papers, but I saw the tightness in her jaw. Then the front doors opened. Richard walked in first, in a suit too expensive for someone who claimed to be struggling financially. Behind him, Emma, my granddaughter. 17, tall, tense, arms folded like armor across her chest. They weren't smiling. They knew something was wrong. But not how wrong. The administrator, Janine, met them near the entrance and led them toward the lounge where I waited. Another nurse followed, wheeling in a tall woman with steel-gray hair and an expression like polished stone. Miss Evelyn Cole, my lawyer. She set her briefcase on the table, clicked it open, and began arranging papers in deliberate silence. Mom, Richard said tightly, what is this? Why did we have to come down here? Emma stood back, eyeing the room. Are you sick? What's going on? No, I said softly. I'm not sick. I'm awake. That confused them. Perfect. Evelyn straightened a paper and looked up, her voice cool and clear. Thank you all for being here. As legal counsel to Mrs. Mary Taylor, I've been asked to read a prepared statement and present supporting documentation. Richard shifted. Wait, legal counsel? For what? Evelyn ignored him. She began to read. On the date of March 17th, Mrs. Mary Taylor executed a full transfer of her personal assets, including legally confirmed stock holdings in Tremont Industrial Corporation, into the newly established Lucas Taylor Foundation. What the hell is that? Richard snapped. A non-profit entity dedicated to supporting children with neurodivergent conditions and their families. The foundation is under the permanent direction and oversight of Mrs. Taylor during her lifetime. Emma's jaw dropped. What? Evelyn continued unfazed. Additionally, following independent investigation, the sale of Mrs. Taylor's home at 127 Maple Lane has been found to be executed under fraudulent power of attorney, with forged documentation. Legal action is pending. The property is currently under freeze, and may be reclaimed. Richard stepped forward. You can't be serious. This is insane. She's been manipulated. She is of sound mind and legal capacity, Evelyn replied coolly. She was medically evaluated per protocol. Your claim is invalid. You let her do this, he growled, turning to Anna. Anna didn't flinch. I helped her protect herself. Emma finally broke her silence. This is a joke, she snapped. You're giving everything to strangers? You just erased us. Her voice cracked. Not with grief but fury. You betrayed your family, she shouted. You betrayed me. The room fell silent. I stood, straightened my cardigan, and walked to face her. No, I said, my voice steady, low but sharp enough to cut. You betrayed me. Emma blinked, stunned. You sold my house behind my back. You called me a burden. You used my money, my memories, my name, to make your lives more comfortable while you discarded mine. I turned to Richard. You thought I wouldn't notice. That I was old, tired, quiet. I stepped closer. But I remember everything. Every scraped knee I kissed. Every fever I soothed. Every shift I worked to buy you shoes. He looked away. I didn't leave you, I said, voice rising. You left me. Emma's eyes filled with tears, not of guilt but rage. You'll regret this. No, I said. I regret trusting the wrong people for too long. Evelyn stood. Unless there are further objections, this meeting is concluded. All matters are legally binding. She handed a copy of the foundation's papers to Janine and turned to leave. Richard was frozen. Emma stormed out. I stood still, heart racing, not from fear but freedom. Anna placed a hand on my shoulder. You did it, she whispered. No, I said. We did. That night I sat by the window with Lucas, watching the sun fade over the garden. He rested his head on my arm and said sleepily, You look like a superhero today. I smiled. Maybe just an old lady who finally remembered her worth. The gate creaked just the way I remembered it. Wrought iron, slightly rusted but still standing proud. The front path was overgrown with wildflowers now, the kind that planted themselves when no one was watching. The porch swing was gone, but I could always get a new one. Or maybe not. Maybe I'd just sit on the steps and let the sun touch my face. As I was home. I bought the cottage on Birch Hollow Road 3 weeks after everything was finalized. It wasn't grand, just 2 bedrooms, a crooked chimney, and a tired rose bush that needed pruning. But it was mine. Chosen, not inherited. A place with windows that let the light in and enough silence for peace, not loneliness. Anna helped me move in. Lucas ran from room to room, his feet pattering against the old wood floors, narrating every corner like a real estate agent for superheroes. This can be my room, he said, standing in a space with slanted ceilings. And you can have the one with the window that smells like books. It's cedar, Anna said, smiling. Books, Lucas insisted. I gave him the room. We settled in quickly. Anna and Lucas moved into the smaller guest house in the back. A converted shed with just enough space for 2 people who knew how to live lightly. I insisted on paying for renovations and for Lucas's therapy, specialized schooling, and anything else he needed. She protested at first. You've done enough, she said one night over tea. No, I replied. Not until he has everything your love couldn't buy alone. She wiped her eyes and didn't argue again. Mornings became rituals. Anna brewed coffee. I made toast. Lucas liked to sit in the garden with his headphones and line pebbles up by color. Some days were quiet. Some were wild. Some were heartbreakingly beautiful. There were no surprises. No betrayals. Just life. Soft, safe, and shared. One Saturday, I found an old box of Henry's gardening tools in the shed. Lucas helped me scrub off the rust. I taught him how to plant bulbs, how to water just enough, how to whisper to the roots. Plants can hear, he asked. Only the kind words, I said. He believed me. The garden came alive slowly. Lavender, tulips, 2 young apple trees. It became a place of rhythm. A space where time passed not by clocks but by blooming. Lucas would run barefoot through the yard, laughing, his voice rising in a song only he understood. Sometimes he'd grab my hand, pull me into his world, spinning and clumsy and free. One day, as we sat on the bench beneath the apple tree, sticky with juice and sunshine, he leaned against me and said, "You're like a real grandma now." I smiled, brushing his curls away from his eyes. I've always been one. I just forgot for a little while. Letters came from Richard. 2 to be exact. One apologized without saying sorry. The other asked about inheritance. I didn't answer either. Emma never wrote. I didn't expect her to. Some things don't bloom again. But others grow stronger in new soil. Anna and I spent evenings on the porch. She taught me to knit again. I taught her how to make Henry's lemon pie. We didn't talk about the past often, but sometimes quietly, we'd remember the woman I had been when we met. The woman who whispered instead of speaking. "She's gone," Anna said once. "She had to be," I answered. One afternoon, I sat in the garden while Lucas painted the side of the old shed blue. His brushstrokes were wild, uneven, and glorious. He was laughing. Barefoot. Spattered in color. He ran to me suddenly, paint on his cheek, and grabbed my hand. "Come see, Grandma Mary. Come see." I let him pull me. Let him spin me under the open sky. And as he danced around me, full of light, I looked up and whispered, "Family isn't always blood. Family is who is born in your heart."